the store here on Airport Way. Oh, whoa, hold on.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. And I've been doing this we're on year 18 now, so it's been a long time. We're here to answer any and all your questions. We've seen a lot. Can't say we've seen it all, but we've seen a fair amount. This is my colleague Jamal.
So I'm Jamal Mfundishi. I've been working in this industry for 23 years. I started out as a customer. I'm a C6-7 quadriplegic, use a manual chair, and have been, I started out as a customer, got my first wheelchair van from this company back in '94, and have been doing this full-time since '99. So I get to bring a little of experience with, hopefully Jesse and I can use our experience to help answer your guys' questions and point you in the right direction if you have any questions.
Do we have any questions like off the bat? Like anybody want to see something in particular or add a question about something specifically that's on their mind? Like I said, we'll start with your question. That way we make sure those are all addressed. And other than that, we can show you lots of cool stuff today. Just show you what's out there, what's available, and just kind of really see the newest, latest, and greatest, and everything that exists, and those kind of things as well. So,
first of all, thank you guys for coming today. I appreciate you taking the time. I was interested in hearing about side ramps versus rear ramps and the advantages and disadvantages of each style.
Sure, just briefly, one of the big advantages of a side entry lift, a ramp going into the side entry of a van, is that it does allow the person in the wheelchair ultimately to get their chair up the ramp and either sit in the midsection, or this front passenger seat can be removed and the person in the wheelchair can sit in that front passenger position. We got a van right around the corner with that seat out already if you want to take a quick look.
you guys can see that the interior front passenger seat is removed, so anybody in your family can sit up front next to you. That way they're up front next to you. Easy conversation. Great for ease of more interior space once you get into the vehicle.
It cut me off.
Oh,
There we are.
And the other option is
Now you made me sound.
when it comes to side entry is the person that's the chair user can sit in the midsection. I'll demonstrate. So the wheelchair user can sit in the midsection, and that will still leave for 2 ambulatory people up front. And it also leaves the rear bench seat available for 3 positions. 2's usually comfortable, but there are 3 seatbelt positions back there. That's going to give you the most seating available for a wheelchair accessible minivan. The rear entry vans have a ramp coming straight out of the back. The limitation on the rear entry is that it will only allow the wheelchair user to sit in the very rear portion of the cargo area or in the midsection. They will never be able to get the wheelchair to the front driver or front passenger position. So they're always going to be sitting in the middle. And that also compromises the mid-row seating. There's 2 options. There are some very small aftermarket seats that would sit on each side of the wheelchair in the mid position, but it requires small people to sit in them. The seats are small, not very comfortable. And you lose basically your 3rd row of seating to make room for the wheelchair to enter and exit. They do have an optional 2-person fold down rear bench seat that can be used. But it is honestly very uncomfortable, and it just doesn't help. So the big negative on rear entries, again, are no access to the front position, and it does force the wheelchair to sit in the midsection, and you have less seating for ambulatory people. The benefit is generally the rear entry conversion is a little more affordable because there's less structural modification of the vehicle, so it makes it a little more less expensive, or it makes it less expensive. Those are really the biggest advantages. And then lastly is parking. If you have a rear entry vehicle, you can park in pretty much any accessible spot or non-accessible spot, but you have to watch out for the cross traffic behind the vehicle because you're going to have a 4-foot ramp and then you need 4 feet to get off the end and turn. So basically you need 8 feet behind you where you park. If it's at home in a driveway, maybe not that big of an issue. If it's in a grocery store parking lot where it's really busy, there's a lot of side traffic you have to be careful of. And then the advantage and disadvantage of the side entry, again, as we discussed, additional seating, the wheelchair user can in the midsection or the front passenger position, or even drive for a short period of time, as long as they have enough physical ability. The negative is they tend to be a more expensive modification because there's just a lot more structural modification to the vehicle for a side entry. The other thing is side entries, the ramps coming out of the side. So you have roughly a 4-foot ramp. You need another approximately 4 feet to get off the end and turn the chair. So you need 8 feet next to you where you park, which generally means you need an access aisle. Slightly more limited parking, but you have to be a little strategic and find the appropriate place to park. And the benefit, worry about, be a little bit safer. Does that at least cover the basics of your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you for that. It was very informative. Yeah.
Is there
Perfect.
anything I can add or clarify?
No, I think that's what I was hoping for to learn. Thank you.
Very good.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just a question just came in, Jamal, on the chat. Someone asks, I understand the larger ALS power chair can be easily, locked into the passenger seat area. I currently use a smaller portable folding chair. Can it also be locked into position?
So a lot of the small folding chairs are generally not compatible with the automatic lockdown system. The companies that make those automatic wheelchair restraints, generally Easy Lock and Q-Straint, they look at the structure of the chair to make sure that it is solid enough that it would withstand an impact or a crash. And a lot of the folding manual chairs are not structurally sound enough to do so. And also a lot of those folding manual chairs do not have a high back and a headrest. So if you are sitting in a small folding chair with a low back and you're sitting in the seat and the vehicle gets rear-ended from the back, if you don't have a high back and a headrest, your body's going to lean over backwards very acutely and create additional problems. So generally not recommended. And the vast majority of those chairs, and honestly, I can't think of one that I've seen, really is compatible with the lockdown.
Yeah, that's something, yeah, we just have to schedule.
Any other questions?
I thought that was helpful.
I have a question. When the wheelchair is in the middle section of the van with the side ramp, so is that secured somehow?
Sure.
Is that locked in?
Yes, I'll show you.
Okay.
Okay, so almost all of the accessible side entry vans are going to have a strip of wheelchair tie down securement tracks on the floor. You can see a strip that goes all the way behind me. And then in front of me, there's another strip that goes all the way across the front. All of the vans are going to come with a set of wheelchair restraints that are going to fit into the tie down tracks and then attach 2 to the front of the chair and then 2 to the rear of the chair. Those 4 tie downs will hold the chair securely. And then in addition to that, you'll use the factory mid-row lap and shoulder harness that will also click into a seatbelt receptacle that will also click into the track in the rear to hold the chair as well. And then we have a little demo stand. I'm actually going to show you what those restraints look like. Come this way.
He's too quick.
He is super fast.
Yeah.
He's the fastest on wheels around here. So We got a demo stand that's just going to show you, this is the manual chair, and you're going to look at the different styles of tie down. He's going to go over the just kind of different styles. This just a standard wheelchair. We're going to show you how to lock it in and how to hook it in. So
Okay, so again, all of the vans are going to come with a standard set of 4-point wheelchair tie downs. This is an example of one. So ultimately, it locks into the floor. It will be in the same track that's in the van. So it locks into the floor. You'll ultimately take the hook of the tie down. You'll attach it to the framework of the chair. And in this application, you'll pull the strap tight. You'll flip it over. It actually draws in a little more material and makes it nice and snug. Click, that is one. Then you'll do another one in the back and 2 more in the front, and that will hold the chair securely. Again, those are what are known as over center tie downs. Those come standard with all the vehicles. Then there's an upgrade called a self-retracting tie down. I'll show you what that one looks like. So that tie down will lock into the floor the same way. The difference is when you pull the hook out and attach it to the chair, it's going to self-tension itself. You can ratchet it down and get it a little bit tighter, but it's going to be super snug. The benefit is it's self-tensioning and it holds the chair quite secure. When you want to release it, you'll press the red release button, pull the tension out, and it retracts back out of the way. So that is the second upgrade option. And then lastly is the automatic wheelchair securement system, either the Q Strength or the Easy Lock system. So on this demo stand, you would imagine that right here is the ramp coming up the side of the van. The wheelchair will come up the ramp. The wheelchair will turn and pull into this front passenger position. And on the floor, you're actually going to have the wheelchair securement base.
that device right there that's on the ground, that will be bolted to the vehicle, either in the front section, either front passenger, front driver, or in the midsection, like where Jamal was sitting on that van.
Oh, right.
And then there'll be a little docking device you'll see that's right here, little pin that'll be bolted to underneath the vehicle, underneath your chair. That is what essentially is going to guide that bolt, going to guide and click into this device that's bolted to the ground. This would be in lieu of tying your chair down 4 times. You still will use the factory seat belt because that is what's crash safe. So, and then what you would do is you turn, click in, and then you'll see that that chair clicks into that device right there. And now you're locked in.
Show them the dash. So on the dash, there will be a visual indicator indicating that the wheelchair is locked in, and the green light indicates that everything is green, good to go, and your chair is locked in and secure. If the chair was not locked in and you thought it was, as soon as you start the car, 2 things. 1, if you thought the chair was locked in, but it's not, a red light will illuminate, indicating that you're not properly locked in. And also, when you go start the car, you're going to hear a tone. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's kind of a high-pitched tone, and that's warning you that the chair's not locked in. If that's the case, then you will make sure the chair is locked in by pulling forward and re-engaging. And as soon as the chair locks in, the tone stops, the green light comes in, indicating that you're green, good to go. And then when you want to get out, ultimately, once you turn the car off, you're going to hit the release button, and that's going to open up the mechanical jaws and allow the chair to roll back and get out of the vehicle.
Nice.
Now that it's unlocked, the chair is released, will roll back, then you can turn and go down the ramp and out of the vehicle.
Cool.
That's kind of a quick overview of the wheelchair securement system.
Cool. That's great.
Any other questions about that specifically, or any other topic?
And that will work with the power wheelchair also?
Yes. Most high-end rehab power chairs are compatible with the lockdown system.
Okay.
It's very rare that you'll find a high-end rehab chair that's not compatible.
Okay.
Fortunately, there's two different manufacturers, and between both of them, they're able to accommodate the vast majority of power chairs.
Oh,
We
great.
can always look, if you have a question about compatibility, we can look up for you the different options and let you know if it's compatible or not. It only takes a few moments, and we're happy to do it.
Oh, great.
Hey, Jamal, can you explain the pros and cons of putting a lockdown bracket on a power chair?
Sure. So the question is, what are the pros and cons of having a wheelchair with the lockdown system installed? So the benefit is that it allows the wheelchair user to go up the ramp, turn and lock in on their own. When they're locked in, it does not require somebody else to add wheelchair tie downs to their chair. So it gives a little more independence for the person that's in the chair. And it also allows them to get out of the vehicle independently as long as they're able to hit a release button and operate the controls of the wheelchair. The biggest negative aspect is, unfortunately, lack of ground clearance. So your average power chair is only going to have about 3 inches of ground clearance anyway. And so when we put the bracket on the chair, it usually goes on the inside bottom of the battery box. The bolt hangs down there, and that's what ultimately engages in the base. But you can see there's not a lot of ground clearance here. So the negative is less ground clearance, but the benefit is it allows the person to have a little more independence, and it makes it a whole lot easier to secure the chair, and it's a whole lot faster. And if you have a caregiver or a partner that is not the most agile, sometimes getting the wheelchair tie downs on the chair is really impossible for somebody. If you have somebody that may be a little older or may have some back issues, maybe a bigger person, or have arthritis where manual dexterity is a little difficult to operate the tie downs, that's where the automatic lockdown system works really well in those scenarios. And it may be worth the compromise of lack of ground clearance, but easier to get the chair in, and it's a whole lot faster. The other component is, again, we talked about ground clearance. Generally speaking, the tie down bolt oftentimes is very close to the center wheels. So if you're going over a big obstacle, basically as the wheels go up, over, and back down, the bolt also goes up, over, and down a corresponding amount. So the time that it really gets you in trouble, and I'll just use my chair as an example, is if you're going over a threshold, maybe at a 45-degree angle, and then you have one wheel on one side, one wheel on the other, that's where this bolt can get caught up on a door threshold. But generally speaking, when you go through a door, most people go through at a 90 angle. So even if you had that bolt right under the wheels, as the wheels go up, over, and down, that bolt will go up, over, and down.
Okay. Cool.
Jamal,
question.
kind of an unrelated question, but a good one that came in over the chat is, are there different weight limits for the ramps to enter the vehicle? Concerns about a large person with a heavy power chair.
Sure. So a lot of the older vans back from the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of those ramps were maxed out at 600 pounds. A lot of the newer ramps are going to be a minimum of 750, and quite a few of them are 1,000-pound capacity as well. So in the 23 years I've been doing this, I can't think of anyone that was over the weight capacity of, especially of the newer ramps, because a lot of high-end power chairs can be, it's not uncommon that they're 350, 400 pounds, on rare occasions, 450 pounds. And then if you have a person that's, let's say, a big person and they're 300, 400 pounds, they're going to fit within that 1,000-pound capacity. We find that if someone is just so large that they would be over capacity with their chair, they generally don't fit through the door because of width-wise. Height's less of an issue, but it's usually width. If you have someone that's 400, 450 pounds, they're just a really big person. And generally speaking, the door opening on these vans usually max out between 31 and 32 inches wide. And that's where you're getting one armrest scraping through one side and the armrest or joystick on the other side scraping through. So generally speaking, being over capacity, especially for the newer model vehicles, is generally not an issue that we run into. I won't say never, but generally not.
Thank you. A couple other questions that came in. Dina, I'm going to ask yours first because it was related to what we were just talking about. So she asks, does the bolt low clearance affect the movement of chair over rougher surfaces? You may have already explained this, but could you just run through it again, considering if this is
Certainly.
a challenge?
So yes, there is a chance that that bolt could hang a little bit low. So if the chair user is going to stay on hard paved surfaces, sidewalks, driveways, concrete surfaces, asphalt,
Hardwood
floors in a
floors.
house, hardwood floors,
Tile.
generally those things, ground clearance is not going to be an issue. It's usually when you go outside and if you're on broken pavement, or if you go off road and you're on a dirt trail, could you have a root sticking up or a rock sticking up that the chair potentially could make contact with? It's possible. Generally, the things that we see people get caught on are like if you have a carpet runner in a hallway. So if you got a long hallway and you got a carpet runner and it got a little bunched up, there's a chance that that bolt could catch the carpet and drag it with. Or the other option, or the other scenario is, let's say you're outside on grass, and let's say here's the top of the grass, here's the dirt, and you have a garden hose sitting right here. So the garden hose is going to sit on top of the grass, but the power chair being heavy is going to crush the grass down, meaning that bolt's going to hang down, potentially grabbing that garden hose on the way by. Those are the scenarios that we see. And when somebody comes in to talk about the wheelchair securing options, we talk about this in detail. And so there have been scenarios where you have, let's say, a partner or a caregiver that's an older person, not in the best of health, and there's no way they're going to be able to get down and use the automatic tie downs. So it kind of comes down to, do you use no tie downs, or do you use the automatic lockdown system and just deal with the lack of ground clearance on those limited applications? And honestly, in the couple decades that I've been doing this, I haven't had people come back and going, oh, that was a terrible thought, we should never have done that. The vast majority of people are like, this is a wonderful product, we love it, and we're willing to live with the compromise.
Good. Phew.
Yeah, great. These are good questions coming in.
Absolutely, guys. These are wonderful questions.
Another question from Brian. He asks if you've ever heard of anybody that's rolled their van with a power wheelchair in the Easy Lock, and just kind of curious how it performs under those circumstances from our daredevil Brian himself.
Oh yeah. So Brian, actually, I've known two people that have rolled their vehicles. One person was a passenger only, and their chair stayed secured in the lockdown system. The other gentleman was an independent driver in a power chair. He rolled his van. The van ultimately landed upside down. When the paramedics came, they had to get a bunch of paramedics inside the van, hit the manual release, and then they all had to be there to hold the chair because the guy was literally hanging upside down.
Oh
They
my
had to prop
God.
the chair just enough to get it out of the lockdown. Then they had to rotate the chair 180 degrees so they could set the guy down on the wheels of his power chair, which ultimately was on the ceiling or the roof of the van. And then they had to use the jaws of life to cut the door open so they could get the power chair out. Bottom line, the chair was still fastened in the lockdown system. It did not break the chair, and the gentleman came out relatively unscathed. So to answer your
Wow.
question, yes, it's happened several times before. Both
Scary.
Q-String and Easy Lock have crash test videos and the data to support their claims that these truly are crash tested and safe for driver and passenger applications.
Incredible. Thanks for asking that question, Brian. It's a really, really good one. Another question came in, Jamal, which I think this is such an important question, and something we get asked about a lot, is just affording vans. Typically ALS patients have shorter lifespans, and vans are expensive. So, what are your thoughts about the cost and just considerations on how people pay for this?
Yeah, that is a common topic of discussion. I kind of get two schools of thought. One is I'll have someone come in and they know that they're not going to be living 10 years or 15 years. They may be a fast progressor and they may only have a 2 or 3 year span in front of them. And some people come in with the attitude that I'm not going to need this for very long. I don't want to burden my family with an expensive vehicle that they're going to have to get rid of when I don't need it anymore. So I just want something that's relatively inexpensive. And so knowing that, we do the needs analysis. We figure out how tall they are, how big of a van do they need, and then ultimately find the right vehicle that fits their needs as well as meets their budget. Conversely, I'll have people come in that say, this is the last vehicle I'm ever going to have. I want something really nice. I want to go out with a bang. And I'll have people that'll buy something that's a little nicer. And honestly, the other thing that we talk about and want to consider is, if you're only going to need the vehicle for a few years, you really need a vehicle that's still going to be reliable, because you're going to end up having lots of doctor's appointments. You need the vehicle to start every time. You need the conversion to function every time. And if you're trying to save your dollars and buy a $10,000 Craigslist special, it's probably an older van with a lot of miles. The majority of its life is already used up, and you're going to have some ongoing maintenance issues, and it may not be the most reliable thing. When you buy something that's a little bit newer and nicer, at least it's going to work well for you. It's going to get you to your appointments, and it's going to allow you to go do those things in the last couple of years of your life, wanting to, basically check off boxes on the bucket list. Have you gone here? Have you done that? Have you seen these people? So a lot of people will look at it as an investment into the quality of their life for the last couple of years they're going to be around. And especially the last year when, the level of paralysis is significant. There's usually a feeding tube, maybe a ventilator. And those are the really difficult periods of time. And that's the last time you want to deal with vehicle problems or the inability to get to an appointment as necessary. So ultimately, I don't have a great solution as far as saying, financially, here's all your options. But the discussion we just had is what I have frequently with people. And I found that there are some really good lending organizations that are happy to lend on wheelchair accessible vans. And that way someone might be able to find something that's a little more expensive that they thought they were going to be able to afford, but allows them to get into something that's going to be a little bit newer, a little more reliable. So it takes care of them instead of fails on them at the worst time. So to summarize, there is no one answer that fits everybody. But again, there are some lending institutions. For example, we use the Northwest Access Fund. For a lot of people, they do a 5% flat loan. They are a nonprofit lender, and they are great to work with. And we've had a lot of people that didn't think they'd be able to afford an accessible vehicle, apply and get a vehicle loan through them. And it wasn't exceedingly expensive. They weren't paying a super high interest rate, and it allowed them to get a nice, reliable vehicle and basically use it how they need to for the last years of their life.
We also, Braun just introduced the leasing program. Leasing program just came out. It's only been available for about a month and a half, 2 months now. It is only available on the 2022 Sienna, which we were actually looking at. They go from 24-month up to a 39-month lease. Payments can start at $699 per month and move its way up. We truly understand that it is a larger monthly payment, but sometimes the best option is also to buy used vans, which we have anywhere from, what do we have?
We'll have used accessible vans basically starting in the upper teens and up from there. And then just one other consideration is, we know, because we've been doing this for a long time, we know how this system works. We know how the cycle goes. One of the nice things is we do a lot of vehicle buybacks. And so one of the discussions that we'll have is that if someone's going to buy a vehicle and they know that they're probably not going to need it after 2 or 3 years, then there's a discussion that we have about, when we don't need this anymore, are we able to buy it back? And the answer is yes. So a person's not stuck with a vehicle that's difficult to sell because it's a very limited market. them, we'll do an appraisal and give them an outright purchase price. And it's a whole lot easier to liquidate an asset when they don't need it anymore. And that's also in a time where usually people are pretty emotionally distraught, and it makes it difficult to do certain things. And selling a vehicle is usually not fun for most people. And having the ability to come back to us when we do an outright purchase can be comforting in that regard.
And guys, we're also here. If you guys find a van that from a family, we encourage it. Like, you know, from an ALS family to another ALS family, encourage it. You know, we're here to service it. Keep that van on the road. So that's another resource. We're here to just service it, make sure it's still maintained and stays on the road. So.
And also the other thing is there are a lot of used wheelchair accessible vans out there. Some are pretty nice, but there's also kind of a lot of older, worn out stuff that is either obsolete or very difficult to get parts for. So if you are looking at a vehicle that is within your price point, maybe a little older, we are also happy to take a quick peek at it and at least give you our opinion that, yes, this is a good vehicle. Parts are still available, or no, this is completely obsolete. There are no replacement parts. It's probably not worth buying. Even if someone gives you a free van, but it doesn't work and you can't get parts for it, it may not have a lot of value if you can't get it to work. So where I'm going with this is if you're looking at something that's inexpensive, especially something a little older, please feel free to give us a call. And because I've been doing this for a couple decades and Jesse's real close behind me, we have a pretty good idea what's out there and what's serviceable and what's not. So we're happy to give you our professional opinion about the feasibility of, is it worth buying and putting a few dollars in and fixing or maintaining, or is it obsolete? You really shouldn't buy it, walk away, look for something else.
Kathy, I saw a few questions come in. One was pay range, like what okay. So vans can go literally from, I think the cheapest van we have on our lot right now is 14,900, and they go up to about 85,000 and everything in between. We typically have anywhere from 30 to 50 vans, depending on inventory. And we have literally a van in every way, shape, or form. When we do a needs analysis, we're going to figure out how tall you sit, how many people are in your family, what kind of sitting position you want to sit in, what kind of ramp you like, what do you feel most comfortable with, and then we go and look for that for you. We typically have most of them on site. And if we don't, we're part of a organization that has 50 locations. So if you find one maybe on our lot that you like, and you're like, hey, can you find me one a little bit newer with less miles? We'll go look for it. Or, hey, can you find one a little bit cheaper with more miles? Great, we'll go look for it. Or heck, if you don't like the color, we'll go look for that one as well. So. Kathy, what was the other question? I didn't.
Yeah, the other question, there's a few more that's come in. A question about not being in a wheelchair yet. Kind of when's the right time to start looking at options? Is it beneficial to come see you all before needing a wheelchair, before accessing a wheelchair? Kind of how do you go through that process? What would you recommend?
What my opinion is I think it's important for people to do their homework before the chair comes, because you want to at least get an idea of what your options are and what those pros and cons are and what those price points are. Specifically with people with ALS, we are very focused on what is the sitting height from the top of their head to the floor. So, and the reason is, as the paralysis increases, at some point, someone is not going to have the ability to duck their head and go through a door opening. And so what we do, and we'll illustrate this in a moment, what we don't want to do is have somebody go buy a van, they don't have their power chair yet, they finally get their power chair and find out that they sit really tall. Let's say they're 56, 57 inches tall, and the van that they got has a 53-inch door opening. And maybe at first you can duck when you have enough ability, but as the paralysis increases, at some point, ducking through a short doorway is not going to be an option, and there literally will not be a way to get the head into that door opening. So it's really important that if somebody's going to buy a van, that they have a very clear understanding of what that sitting height is, top of the head to the floor. So if they know definitively they sit 55 inches, then we're looking at vans that are going to have a 56 or 57-inch door opening, not smaller than that. And I just want to show you an example of a van that has a smaller door opening, just to illustrate that point.
Here we go, guys. We're going on a roll. So this is the manual style ramp here.
Oh,
So yeah, I'm gonna bring in this other ramp because it's gonna make it really difficult to do.
right.
You guys are gonna get a first-hand glance at the Chevy Traverse, which is an SUV converted wheelchair accessible vehicle with an in-floor ramp. You can see how the ramp goes in to the car and out of
Oh
the
my
way.
God.
And then the door comes in and shuts. And so if you absolutely hate minivans, this is an option. And you can see the door shut. So now Jamal's going to get into the manual ramp here. And this is the Chrysler Voyager.
Okay, so I'm 6 feet tall. I sit 51 inches from the top of my head to the floor. In this van that I'm in now, it has a 10-inch lowered floor with a 53-inch door opening. So you can see I fit, but again, I sit relatively low. If I were to sit into a power chair, at a minimum, I would probably be 3 to 4 inches taller. So if I was able to fit, if I had to duck to fit through the door now, you know, and then I got to the point where I couldn't duck anymore, you can see how my head's not going to clear. Or if I'm coming from the outside, I'm not going to clear, and then I'm going to be stuck. So again, the thing that we really focus on is being able to determine how tall you sit from the head to the floor in your final power chair, not a loaner chair, not a demo chair, not a borrowed chair, but your final chair. That way we can tell definitively that you're going to be able to fit through the door well when it gets to the point where you're not ducking. Does that answer the question a bit, or do I need to elaborate more on that?
So we can go to a bigger van and show you how much gap there is. You can see right now, Jamal's only got about, I don't know, like this is
Maybe what, 2
3
inches?
fingers worth, right? Like, and if he goes into another van, he'll have,
Big door.
we'll go to a big door opening, which is the Sienna. You're gonna see he has a lot more room on a bigger.
Oh, yeah.
You see how much shorter he sits, guys?
Oh,
Like,
my
so here's
Lord.
the same 3 fingers, right? Here's 4. So add maybe 2 or 3 more, and that's the height difference. And that's the
Cool.
difference in the 2 vans. They both are like a folding style ramp, like he was in. That one was a manual folding, but this is a fully powered folding. But door opening makes a big difference.
And then do we want to just point at the middle high door opening?
Yeah.
So
Then- go ahead.
For those people that do not fit in an accessible minivan, basically people that sit higher than 56 or 57 inches, the next option is the larger vans, like a Sprinter, the Ford Transit, or the Ram ProMaster. These have much bigger door openings. Even the smaller door openings are 60 inches, where the biggest minivan door opening is 57. So this is going to be at least 3 inches. If you get a mid-high roof or more, you're going to be much taller than that. So you can get someone that sits really tall in a really big chair and fit through this door opening quite well. The limitation of the big vans is the chair user basically has to sit in the midsection. They are not very friendly to get a wheelchair in the front passenger position. The floor is not flat. And if you were to take this seat out and put somebody in a chair, they generally aren't going to have enough headroom or decent visibility out. And then lastly, the way the majority of the lifts are, they are going to be in the way of where a power chair needs to go to get into that front passenger position. So there's really not a great way past the lift to get to that front passenger position and be secured in their wheelchair. So generally, somebody that needs a really tall door opening is going to be relegated to the midsection of the van.
Sorry, we're right by the airport, so planes fly over. Pardon our interruption.
So another question that came in,
Yeah.
about purchasing, how does purchasing work with a VA grant for those veterans who might be accessing the automobile grant?
Sure. So the vehicle grant's worth a little over 22 grand, and it can be used on either a brand new vehicle. So I'm just going to use round numbers to make this easy. So if somebody was looking at a vehicle and the van portion itself was about 40 grand and they wanted to use the vehicle grant, if it's a $40,000 van and the grant's worth 22, then they are only coming out of pocket 18K. It's basically a credit that's applied towards the vehicle, and they pay the difference between the grant and the purchase price of the vehicle. If it's a used vehicle, so the VA will do, for example, what we call a used new. We'll take a used vehicle that's 1 or 2 years old. They'll put a brand new conversion on it because the VA prefers to pay for a new conversion. And that used vehicle may be $29,000, $30,000. And so they, again, would pay the difference between the $22,000 grant and the $29,000 vehicle purchase price. So they may be out of pocket only $7,000. So it makes it pretty easy for the veteran to be able to get and if they needed a loan, nice part is if the conversion's, again, a round number, let's say the conversion was 30 grand and the VA is paying 22 for the vehicle portion, that vehicle's got over $50,000 worth of equity. And if they only had to get a loan for $7,000, you have a $7,000 loan off a vehicle that's worth almost 60 grand, 50 grand worth of equity already. It's pretty easy to get a loan to cover that balance.
Cool.
Good question, by the way. And we can help you guide with the VA on filling for the grant. You got to fill out some application. Certain people we need to send it to. We can walk you through that process, find out who your rep is that makes those decisions and guide you in the right direction.
Unfortunately, I've worked with a lot of veterans with ALS. I've walked them, basically handheld them through the entire process, beginning to end. Happy to do that for anyone that has questions or has that need. That's one of the reasons why we're here, to walk you through that process.
Yeah, a lot of really good questions that have come in so far. And I just want to take a moment to read a comment from Brian. This was related to the Easy Lock pin, and there were some questions about, concern about clearance and mobility within the chair. And Brian says, on the subject of the Easy Lock pin on the bottom of the chair hanging up on stuff, I've had that system in my van and the pin under my chair for the last 8 years. The pin does hang up on things when I'm driving off road, but you don't have to worry about damaging the pin. I hit lots of rocks and roots. It might stop you, so you'll just have to back up and try a different line. The headaches are well worth not having to tie your chair down every time. Just ask Brian's wife.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
Look at that.
Thank you,
Lived
Brian.
experience.
Yeah, good job, Brian. That's perfectly worded. Hold on. Sorry, somebody's calling in. It'll clear back to the screen. Give us a second.
Glad we didn't lose you. What other questions do folks have? That's great. Lots of good questions coming in. Feel free you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question that way.
I have a question. If we did want to come out to your showroom or your lot, do we need to make an appointment to get a viewing? I'm not in a wheelchair yet, but I probably will be get fitted for one, probably within the next 6 months to a year. But just to come out and see get an idea of what you have to offer, do we need to make an appointment?
So to answer your question, it is not mandatory that you make an appointment, but it is suggested. And here's why. So we invite people to come down and do Wheelchair Van 101. We want to show you from the very beginning what your options are, show you an array of options, talk about the pros and cons, and do a needs analysis to get a clear understanding of what your situation is and what your preferences are. In order to do that, it takes roughly an hour's worth of time,
Mhm.
depending on how many questions you may have. So if you just show up, there may be a chance that someone may not be available immediately and you may have to wait a little bit. Obviously not what we want to do, but if you choose to schedule a time, so if I know that you're going to be here at 2:00 on a Thursday, when you show up at 2, I will have time set aside. I'll be able to spend time with you specifically, answer all your questions, show you what you want to see. And that way it's going to be an efficient use of your time. You're not going to have to be waiting, and you certainly wouldn't have to come back. So it's not mandatory, but it is recommended because we want to make sure we can spend time with you and not be interrupted, and make sure you get all of your questions answered.
Okay, great.
And if you're in
That's
a
good.
chair already and you're having trouble transporting the chair, hence why you're looking for a vehicle, we can also do that needs analysis over the phone and get a good idea what you're looking for, and then pick you up, bring you back here with the van, show you the different options, take you back home, and just kind of make that experience as best as possible as well.
So
Wow,
I've done
that's
that on many occasions. And then also I've done the needs analysis over the phone. And then when someone's kind of narrowed down what they're looking for, then I can find something that's close to that criteria and physically bring it to your house, do a demo in your driveway, do a fitting, answer all your questions. And that way you don't have to leave your house. So that's another option as well.
Wow. That's great. Yeah, really cool.
Jamal, can you kind of give a summary of the differences between the conversion manufacturers?
Yes. So there's two primary players when it comes to wheelchair accessible vans. One of them is Brawnability. The other one is Vantage Mobility International, or VMI. So they are competitors against each other. They both convert the new Toyota Sienna hybrid vehicle. They also do the Honda Odyssey and the new Chrysler products, meaning the Chrysler Voyager and the Chrysler Pacifica. So they basically do the same thing. They just do it a little bit differently. I usually use an example of like Honda and Toyota. They both build really good conversions. It's really more of a subtle preference on, do you like an in-floor ramp or do you like a fold-out ramp? Like on the Traverse a little earlier, Jesse showed you the in-floor ramp option. VMI is known for their in-floor ramps, but they also make fold-out ramps because they know people like those also. Brawnability primarily is known for their fold-up ramps, but they also make an in-floor ramp option because they know people like that as well. Really, the big differences are the ramp styles. And then there are some subtle differences where, for example, VMI, when they were doing their Dodge Grand Caravan product, they only had one door opening height option, where Brawnability had 3 different door opening height options. And also, for example, on the previous body style Toyota Sienna, the VMI Sienna had the biggest door opening and the most interior space. It was noticeably larger than the Brawnability conversion. The benefit was, if you're a really big person and you need all that room, it's a great conversion. Conversely, if you're a smaller person and you don't sit very tall, then you can kind of get swallowed up into that conversion and you can't see out over the dash or out of the windows very well. So it's not that either of them are better or worse. It's just we need to find the best fit for that person. And sometimes it's a VMI product and sometimes it's a Brawnability product. There are some other manufacturers out there that make, and I'm not throwing rocks like saying that they're a poor quality conversion. I'll just say they're not to the same level of refinement as a VMI or Braun product. So there's a couple, second tier manufacturers, and those manufacturers often are targeting the first time buyer. And when you see a van and you see it's got a lowered floor and a ramp, if you don't know what you're looking for, they all look very similar. But there's a lot of subtle differences that you may not pick up on if you're not familiar with the differences. And that's where that first time buyer can potentially, I don't want to say get into trouble, but maybe make a decision that they normally wouldn't if they had a kind of a bigger, better understanding of what their choices were. So, and again, that's where our experience comes in. And we really recommend that if you're looking at something, but you have questions or you're not sure, please feel free to give us a call. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm not the greasy car salesman that's just going to try to cram you into a vehicle to sell you something. I'd rather spend 20 minutes on the phone, talk with you about what you're looking at, and either go, yeah, that's a great product, you should buy it, it's a really good price. Or, you know, you may want to look at this, this, and this to make sure that it's going to work for you. And if you've evaluated those things and it all still is exactly what you want, then maybe it is a good purchase price. But I have had conversations with people that I've said, hey, you may want to look at these couple items. They evaluated that and then went, wow, we didn't realize that. Thank you for letting us know. You saved us from making a mistake. So I know that's a little bit vague, but it's kind of a big, broad question. If you have more specifics, I'm happy to kind of get down into the details a little more if you have some specific questions.
Did that answer the question? The person that answered it, did that at least cover it?
That was Helene who asked that. I'm not sure.
And I can show you real quick. I'm going to show you so this is the Braun Sienna, right? And what we do is we also put this neon green, right? You see this neon green kind of insert what we did. So VMI does an all-wheel drive version of the exact same van, 2022 Toyota Sienna, but all-wheel drive. But what it does is takes up more interior space. So what we did was draw a little template right in here to make sure that when your chair is in the midsection, it has enough turning radius to get in here and see what, if that truly works for you. So it's the same product, same kind of conversion, but it less interior space. So it's a good, just a visual.
So, and also, again, background wise, I have been a VMI only dealer. I've been a Braunability dealer only, and I've been a dual line dealer. Man, I've repped both products at the same time. So I don't have a certain brand loyalty, but here's an example that we just encountered a few months ago with somebody with ALS. So the gentleman called me, said he has ALS, he's getting a power chair, and he wants to get a new Toyota Sienna. And so there was a big discussion about the all-wheel drive Sienna from VMI versus the front-wheel drive Sienna from Braunability. So one of the important considerations was his chair was 400 pounds. He's a medium-sized guy, so he was just over 200 pounds himself. So he and his chair were just over 600 pounds. His wife was just under 200 pounds. So between both of them and their chair was right around 800 pounds. The trim level of Toyota Sienna that they wanted, because what they were looking at the all-wheel drive Sienna, would have given them less than 60 pounds of payload capacity after both of them and the chair. So even though he was going to sit up front as a passenger, she's going to drive, they only had 60 pounds left over. They had the full rear bench seat that was not occupied, but because that van and trim level had under 900 pounds of payload capacity, period, it was basically just those two and, going to Costco and getting some groceries. Literally, that was it. After they really decided, they were like, but we take our grandkids with us frequently. And so they ultimately made the decision that instead of buying the all-wheel drive VMI, they decided to go with the front-wheel drive Braunability because that gave them an extra 150 pounds of payload capacity that they wouldn't have gotten with the all-wheel drive. So it's not that either one of them was better or worse, but for their situation, they needed higher payload capacity so they could bring more people with them. And that's what ultimately made them decide to go with the Braunability product.
Wow.
Kind of my initial thought was we have grip tape here.
Kathy, do you have any other questions?
I have a question. Well, kind of two things. One is, and you've already talked about this a little bit, Jamal, but like the decision making between making making the decision to get an accessible van or not. A
Right.
question that I get often, particularly for someone who's maybe just using a loaner power wheelchair, just kind of getting introduced to the idea of using a chair, is when is it appropriate to look into something like a hitch, a trailer hitch to transport the vehicle versus, the full-blown van? And when do you kind of know? And, this is a little bit of a conversation that people need to have with their doctors and with their PT, but just based on your experience, Jamal, like when do people know, okay, it's kind of time to start thinking about maybe a van, or at the very least renting a van or something like that?
Sure. So, and that actually is a really good question. So you can kind of look at it two ways. I have some people that were very newly diagnosed. Like I had a guy, hey, I've got a Tahoe. I need a hitch mounted lift on the back so I can transport my power chair. Okay. The vehicle's capable. It's within the weight capacity. You start doing the needs analysis. You start asking the questions. Who's the chair user? What's the nature of the disability? And then the person goes, well, it's me and I have ALS. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you can look at it as a short-term solution or a long-term solution. So this gentleman was still pretty ambulatory. And originally he was thinking he was just going to get a hitch mounted lift that would work for the next 6 months or so while he was still as ambulatory as he was. So he could still load the chair on the lift in the back and walk from the back to the front and climb up into the Tahoe. After we spoke a while, he kind of made the decision is instead of spending, $3,500, $4,000 on a lift that's only going to last maybe 6 months, his decision was to go forward and get an accessible vehicle. So it didn't make sense for him to spend $4,000 on a solution that was only going to work for 6 months and then have to get rid of that and then buy an accessible van anyway. Also, I had a lady, for example, also diagnosed with ALS. She had, it was a higher end SUV. I want to say it was a higher end BMW or a Mercedes. I don't recall. I think it was a Mercedes. Point being is, we were talking about, okay, well, you need hand controls. You went through a driving evaluation. The driving evaluator recommended hand controls. You're still ambulatory, but you can't control your feet very well. And do you want to spend the money putting hand controls in your Mercedes, or do you want to look at an accessible vehicle? And for her decision was, let's put the hand controls in the Mercedes. It's my car. I own it now. I love this car. It's something that I wanted for a long time, and I finally got it. So I'm going to drive this as long as I can until I physically can't get in and out of it. And that's what she did. Finally, she called us one day and said, it's time to take the hand controls out of here and put it into a van. So she came down here, we pulled the hand controls out, we looked at vans, and ultimately she got a wheelchair accessible van. She was an independent driver, and now we're to the point where, she's going to be passenger only. And that is just the transition that she had to go through. So for her, it was worth keeping the vehicle, spending a little more money, putting hand controls in it so she could drive it a little bit longer until she wasn't able to drive her dream SUV anymore. So again, it's a case-by-case basis. That's where we do the needs analysis, really start asking questions. We look at, none of us have a crystal ball to see what the future is going to bring, but we do kind of look at the past. Where were you a year ago or 2 years ago in your function? Where are you now? And then we try to project forward. So if a person was ambulatory a year ago, and now that they're sitting all the time, it probably doesn't make sense to try to band-aid the vehicle they have. It's probably it looks like it's time to look for an accessible vehicle option instead of looking for that short-term band-aid that's going to cost money and isn't really a long-term solution.
And also, if you have a loaner chair and you want to go out to Astoria, you're kind of in that chair waiting for your last chair, we do rent vans. We rent full wheelchair accessible vehicles. You guys can rent them for the weekend, for the week. Heck, we got a guy for a month, and he's all over the country right now. So, yeah, renting it is another option. That way you're not owning it, or hey, you just want to rent one. I have people that have a van, older van, maybe not so much reliable, but they're like, hey, we're going to Disneyland. I want to drive one of these brand new vans. They go to Disneyland, come back, and go back to their van once they get back home. So, but yeah, as far as the hitch lift, The ones that go in the back, yeah, we're gonna make sure it fits on the vehicle, make sure that the vehicle, a lot of times the vehicle's limitation is what sets it. You know, we're gonna put a 400-pound chair on the back of a Prius. It's gonna be now a wheelie vehicle. It's gonna pop a wheelie. The front wheels are gonna come off the ground. So it's probably not a recommended application, but just know that, and we'll walk you through that. If you got a vehicle that can do it, like he said, a Tahoe, great. All right, you want to do it? At least, you know, we'll check your progression. If you want to do it on your Tahoe, let's run it until you can't anymore. Or if you don't, you know, that decision's yours and your family and everybody else involved.
But we certainly talk about it and make it kind of clear. We want to really set that expectation of what that product will do and what it won't do, and figure out, you know, is it financially feasible for you to do it or is it not? And that's part of that needs analysis that we do. And that's also when you make an appointment to come in to talk about lifts or vans, that's why it can take an hour or longer, because we're going to talk about all these scenarios. So by the time you left here, you're going to have a really good understanding of what's out there and probably what's most appropriate for you to do. It's just up for you to decide when you want to do it and if you want to do it.
Great. Thank you so much for that great answer. There's a question in the chat. Do the vans have the ability to tow a smaller trailer up to 5,000 pounds?
So the small vans, at this point, the only wheelchair accessible lowered floor minivan that tows is the Chrysler Pacifica, and they will tow 3,600 pounds. And then also the Chevy Traverse SUV also has a hitch, and it's designed to tow, is it 3,500 pounds also. 5,000 pounds is a big heavy trailer. That's when you're going to need a bigger vehicle, like either a Sprinter, a Transit, an older Ford Econoline, something that's a large vehicle that can handle 5,000 pounds of trailer, because that's honestly a pretty big trailer. The minivans just won't do it. And the reason why the majority of the other vehicles don't have hitches is when they lower the floor, the fuel tank that used to be in the middle of the van gets moved behind the rear axle. So now you have a van fuel tank in the back. They reroute the exhaust. And if you go and try to hold up a hitch in the back of the vehicle where it would normally fit, it's not even close to fitting because they changed all of that structure. And also, there's not a good place to bolt it to. And so what they don't want to have happen is, because it's a unibody structure that's been modified, they don't want someone pulling a really heavy trailer, compromising the structure of the vehicle. And the other thing is, because the fuel tank's back there, if the trailer got hit and it pushed the hitch into the receiver, potentially puncturing the fuel tank, there's some concern about fuel system integrity after a crash. Hopefully that answers the question.
Another question in the chat. I'd like to keep an eye on my carbon footprint. Are there any vans available for this desire?
What was the question?
They want to lower their carbon footprint.
Right.
So is there any vans that fit that desire?
So basically, all the vans except the brand new 2021-22 Toyota Sienna Hybrid, these are the only side entry wheelchair accessible vans that are going to reduce that carbon footprint. Instead of roughly 20 miles per gallon, the new hybrid system will allow someone to get in about 30 or low 30 mile per gallon. So basically, you improve your economy by about a third, which is pretty significant. But at this point, no one is making an all electric accessible vehicle. There really hasn't been a lot of discussion about that yet. Where do you put the battery pack in a lowered floor vehicle has been one of the big obstacles. So currently, again, the only vehicle that's available in a hybrid is the new 2021/22 Toyota Sienna. And that is it for a side entry wheelchair accessible vehicle.
All right. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but for timing, we certainly can spend a little more time if folks do have questions, but I want to just emphasize a point that Jamal has said many times, in that this is all a very personal decision. And just like any decision throughout the diagnosis of ALS, definitely something to talk about with your medical team, with your family. Certainly invite anyone who wants to talk through this more with our staff and our care coordinators. Definitely have additional resources for transportation. We know that purchasing even a used accessible vehicle isn't always an option for every single person. And so we want to make sure that you get the resources and information that you need. So feel free to reach out anytime to any of us. And Jamal and Jesse are just great human beings. And I know are just really happy to help in whatever way is supportive.
Yeah. I mean, we run Carfax. You want to know, you're looking on Craigslist, looking for something cheap like that, right? And you find one, you call me. I'll run a Carfax, hand it to you for free. Like, we'll do those kind of things. We want to make sure you guys get what's best for you guys, what's best for your family, what's best for your situation, and make it as quickly and simple as possible. That's the number one priority is your guys' independence, freedom, and just, making sure that you guys can get out and still do the things you need to do. And that's what we're here for. And like I said, Kathy makes a great point. Get with the members of the organization. They are frequently going like, hey, a family's getting rid of a van, we'll help you coordinate that. We'll make sure that do a maintenance on it on the way in, make sure everything's good, and just help you guys, whatever you guys need, we're here for it. But if there is no question, I'll do a quick kind of just run around of what else exists out there, just as far as options and just knowing what exists in there. Okay, here we go.
All right.
As questions come in, Jamal's gonna hop out real quick, but we're gonna do I'm gonna show you real quick. This is just what they call a turning Evo seat. A lot of people talk about this. This is a normal van. It's not a wheelchair accessible van. This can fit on an SUV or a truck, or so if you have a vehicle already that, that'll work for you, that'll have a door opening, this seat will come from the inside of the vehicle, slide out, come all the way out, and let you transfer from side to side, making it a little bit easier. You can see pros and cons. Obviously, you have a vehicle. It's already, it's easy to have that. Cons, it's speed. Here in the Pacific Northwest, it's not normally like this, sunny and blue skies. It's raining most of the time. So during this time, you're getting rained on. But just know that it drops down. You can see it lowering down to the ground, making for transfers easy to transfer from your chair. If you have a caregiver, you might be able to lift them, help them with assist or anything along that. Another style of lift, instead of a trailer hitch, they have one to go on the inside. This is a Chrysler Pacifica or a minivan for that matter. And so this one's simple. All I'm doing is pressing a button. The ramp comes out the trunk and then drops down to the ground. You roll the lift on, right? And you roll, the lift comes out, you roll your scooter or power chair onto the device. All you're doing is pressing a button. It's just gonna go up, go in, and obviously gets out of the way, out of the weather, where the hitch lift one will actually be outside. You'll still need to cover it with either some sort of cover or rain protectant or anything along those lines and secure that down as well. This is an interior style lift. It's great. The negative of it is you're obviously going to lose a set of seating. So in this case, the third row seating is folded down and into the floor and it's out of the way, but you lose that row of seating. So if you have multiple kids, family, and those kind of things, it may not be the option, but it at least takes the vehicle or takes your device and keeps it inside the vehicle, out of the rain, out of the elements. Another kind of cool product, if you really want a truck and you're like, hey, Jamal was talking about towing. Well, this thing will tow the 5,000 pounds. It actually tows 7,500 pounds, but it's a driver's side. The lift comes out, the wheelchair goes down. They make this in both a driver's side and a passenger side version. This is a Chevy truck and this is fully powered. So the person from the wheelchair would enter in. This seat is removable and you'll just essentially, this is all powered. So the power chair, the person in the chair will lift up in their chair. They don't even have to come out. It will slide up, go up vertically, and then the whole side of the car will also go up. Oh, hold on. And now you're going to see it's going to fully close and get out of the way, seal up. And this is just a truck option. This is just showing you that another thing exists. Like if you want a truck and you're adamant, you're like, you know what, that's what I want. It's a truck. Once again, it's speed and cost. The cost of a truck is very, very expensive, but you can see, you can at least get into a truck, out of the way, and truck's an option. So towing, you know, we have some clients that tow, and they tow their horses or still are on the farm, has plenty of ground clearance, plenty of towing, can do kind of just anything and everything along those lines.
Crazy.
You guys saw the full-size van. Those can kind of do it all as well. The Sprinter. Finally, I'm going to go to a trailer hitch option, kind of like what we were talking about. So, trailer hitch option. Here's one right here. It kind of works very similar. It's going to bolt to the back of your hitch. Go onto the back of your hitch. Your scooter is going to roll onto the platform. You're going to turn a key. It's going to unfold, go all the way down to the ground. You will then put your device onto it, either a scooter or power chair. And it will roll onto here. And this will be outside your vehicle on the hitch. So you would then roll your device onto the platform, scooter or power chair, and then you'll secure it down to the platform. And then it will stay flat when you're actually driving along in the back of your vehicle. And then when you're not using it, it will fold up and get out of your way when you're not actually using it. And then if you have like a tailgate or a trunk or a rear hatch, you can actually what they call swing it away. So the device, hold on a second, there we go. The device will actually swing completely out of the way. So that way, if this was the back of your car, you'd still be able to get your tailgate down, or the rear hatch would open and you'd be able to at least get into the back of your vehicle. So that is a swing away option, and that's for your trailer hitch style. As you can see, they all have their pluses and minuses. They all kind of just will fulfill one need or another. Every one of these options has their pluses and minuses, and we're here to help you and walk you through all the different questions you may have.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Hey, Jesse, a lot of folks are on the call from throughout the state. Could you say where your other office?
Yeah, so we're based here in Portland. We're by the airport. We have another location that is in Hillsborough. So if you're on the west side of town or west side of Portland for that matter, I wouldn't cross the bridges. It takes too long. Go to Hillsborough. We also have one south in Wilsonville. So if you're south of Wilsonville, Salem area, those kind of things, go up to Wilsonville. That once again, so you don't have to cross through the Portland area. Also, we have one in Eugene. So if you're in Southern Oregon, Medford, those kind of Eugene, they'll take care of you well. The other locations, the ones in Eugene and Wilsonville are called Ability Center. We're all the same company. We're all here to find the right solution for you. And obviously, if you're north in Washington, Southwest Washington, we're probably the location to come see, being that we're right one exit into the state. All the locations can help you. We share inventory, vehicle for vehicle. They all have rentals available. Just feel free to reach out to any one of those locations. They're willing to help you.
And Mary and I have lists of everybody you can go see and talk to with addresses, phone numbers. So don't feel like you have to sit on Google and figure all this out. Just one of us. We'll make it easy for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jesse, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. This was, I mean, gosh, I learned so much always from y'all. Really just
Great.
happy to have you. Please give our huge thanks to Jamal for.
Oh, he's right here.
Oh, perfect. Thank you,
Right
thank
here.
you, Jamal.
Really great.
Yes,
Our pleasure.
wonderful. All right.
Anytime.
Well, thank you guys so much, and hope everybody has a good rest of your day. Go out and enjoy the sunshine if you can. My goodness, what a treat. All right. Thanks,
Thank
Take
you
care,
so
guys.
much.
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Cassie. Thank you. It was great.
Good
Thank
to
you
see
very much.
Glenn. Great to see you, Rick. Y'all take care.